have the time to listen to me grind. Take down the film watchers and nerds all at once.
Hello, welcome back to The Grind. Patreon only this week, which means that I'm going to release the link to this video on Patreon in a way that only Patreons can see it. The video is on YouTube. If you want to share it, you can. Other people can see it, I guess, if they find it, but it's unlisted. Put out a poll on Patreon, like, what should we do this week for the Patreon only grind? And everyone selected, like, let's make a model. Apart from one guy who was like, please do the Chase Clayball thing. So I will. I'll do both. Why not? Patrons want two. I'll do two. That's just the rule. So I played around with a few ideas of how we could make a model in a video that doesn't last 2 hours or a week. And something that I just recorded with Jared Wackley from Dynasty Nerds for this week's Crossroads episode. I've edited that. That's ready to go for Saturday, so get ready for that. But I'm also meant to interview Tom Kislingberry tomorrow. And he wants, well, we're playing around with some ideas. We're talking about sophomore players. And that reminded me of the sophomore expected points model I made for you guys. The link's somewhere down in that Patreon feed. Trying to use expected points and efficiency, fantasy points over expected, to predict opportunity for the next year, and using draft capital a little bit. I updated it so it's got draft capital involved in there, so Preston Williams gets bumped down despite his expected points because his draft capital is so low. I thought that was a smart thing to add. So I thought, especially with talking with Tom, that doing one for running back would be a good idea, and that's just a couple of stats. I think it would be really easy, a lot easier to make, at least give you the bare bones, the beginnings of making a model. I'm going to run you through at least the first run of making an expected points model for running back. So trying to predict the opportunity running backs will get in their second season by looking at what running backs have done in the past after their rookie year based on their expected points. Anyway, probably be a little clearer to watch it. I'm going to talk through it as best I can. If you have any comments, questions, anything that isn't clear, comment down below. Hit me up on Patreon. I do want to clear up one thing. For those on Patreon or sheep friendly and here to actually learn some of this stuff, I'm learning Patreon too, to be very clear. I don't it's new, but on my posts, like, let's go to my dashboard, which is something that you see. There are several different kinds of posts that I can put out. They're images, videos, and links, basically. When I'm referring to a link in the description, like in the writing that I do, it's normally a link post, which means you can click directly on the picture, and it will take you straight to that link. The reason I'm pointing this out is some people had trouble finding the market share database from here. I updated the wide receiver tab recently, and I was telling you all about it. But this is a link post, so if you click on it, it takes you directly to the MS database. Now, the market share database, I recently put this tab in here so that you all, as patrons, can go directly to the threads on Patreon where you can get all the other databases. So that means it's still restricted to you guys. I'm just linking to the Patreon-only posts, so only patrons can see them. So if you click on these links here, it'll take you to the post, and if you're a Patreon, you'll be able to see the post and then click on the link to go to the next database. But this here, right here, this first one from the original Patreon only post where I was telling you I updated the wide receiver database, it is the free market share database. You can also get to it by following the link in my timeline. But like, this is just the first tab, and across the bottom here, can you see across the bottom here? Probably not, because I've got my screen edited in such a way. Hang on a second here. Just going to shrink this a little bit. Alright, so you see across the bottom here, you have these little buttons. Those are what I call tabs. I don't know what everyone else calls them, but I call them tabs. And And so in the Google sheet here, you've got tabs running along the bottom too. So if you click on the next one, you see the sources tab, and then you get all the prospect data. And this is the wide receiver tab I was talking about that I just updated. So that's how you find that stuff. Someone was asking about it and having trouble finding it, but like it's a direct link to the sheet, and all the data is just in a different little box down here. So hopefully that helps. Anyway, let's get back to it. I'm going to expand this. The reason I got expanded this far is so you can see it a little better. So let me lock that back in. All right, so model. Let's do a model. Not on this one. This one's better. Okay. So what I did is I went to rotoviz and I downloaded expected points. Now with running backs, we have a slight wrinkle because running backs can get expected points in the rushing game or the receiving game, right? So we have to pay attention to that. And so I downloaded a history of running backs going back all the way to 2000 over here. And I've put some formatting in here, but this is literally how it downloads from rotoviz. So you've got the player's name, the season they were playing in. It's all first year. That's what the year means. This is their first season. So I want to predict sophomores. So I'm only interested in what they did in their first year. You've got your draft capital over here. If they're an undrafted free agent, they're listed as 329. If they're a first overall pick, they're listed as 1, right? Fairly simple stuff. I also put games in there for something we'll see later. Then you've got rushing expected points, receiving expected points, rushing fantasy points over expected, and then receiving fantasy points over expected. I'm going to upload this sheet, by the way. I'll put it in the description on Patreon. So by all means, download it and follow me through if you want. Or just watch. Okay. Whichever's easier for you. People learn differently. All right. So just in case you don't know, expected points, I don't know the rotoviz formula, but I do an expected points model for the red zone database I was just posting about, so I know how they work. Essentially what they're doing is taking the touches every player gets, where they get them on the field, so what down, what distance, what line marker, then looking at what you would expect a running back to do if they were an average running back in that position. So what you do there is you find an average for the last, I don't know their formula, say for the last 5 years of what every running back with that kind of touch at that yard line on that down and distance has done. Whether they created 3 yards or a touchdown or whatever, how many fantasy points it on average equated to. And then you look, and that's what expected points is. It's a formula that generates, based on all their touches, how many points were they expected to get if they were an average running back. So you see with Tony Hollins here, in his first year, he got the touches he had meant that he should have had about 17.6 fantasy points. So he didn't touch the ball a lot at all. And not in valuable situations. Or he touched it once in a really valuable situation where you should be expected to get 4 or 5 touchdowns. I don't know what touch that would be, but still. Fantasy points over expected is if they got more or less than that expectation. So Tony Hollins got 7.4. Let me zoom in here. Fantasy points below expected in the rushing game, which means that he actually scored about 10.2 fantasy points that year in the rushing game. So he was 7.4 points below what was expected if he was average, what the average running back has done with those touches over a certain amount of time. So just in case you're unsure what expected points is, that's essentially what it is. Now, what I also did, because we've got 2 expected points models going on here, rushing and receiving, right here, rushing RU and receiving RE. And what I did is created a sum expected points, which is literally a just equals sum, and then you select the cells that you want, and it gives you the sum. It adds them both together, right? Sum's an awkward word. All right. So I also downloaded PPR Points just in case we get into it, because it will be an interesting way to test what's working, what's not, right? And now rotoviz is helpful because it also gives you the year +1. So this is what they did in their rookie season, and since I only have rookie seasons in this database, or year ones, then we know all of these stats come from their second year, right? Now, if you have multiple, if you're not restricting to just first-year wide receivers, it'd be different. But either way, if you're using rotoviz, that's how it works. And I created these two columns up here just to make it really visually obvious what's going where. In rotoviz, it actually puts like little acronyms on here, like query 1 and 1. So it'd tell you it's the second year. But, I just made it simple for myself because I'm a simple-minded man. All right, that was a helper column I was using. So, what we want to know, the first thing with a model is you have to decide what you're looking for. Who do you want to test to try and project or predict someone else, right? So, you're on this camera now. I don't know why I keep looking over there. So, for the start, I don't want all of these seasons because I want a couple of them, or at least one season has to be taken out so that you can use it as an out-of-sample test. Because if you tell the model this is what the data is, and then ask it to prove the data, then it's going to prove the data very well, but you're not going to know how it does on a class that hasn't happened yet. So if I want to know how well it projects 2019 running backs, what I have to test is a year that wasn't used to create the model. That's what an out-of-sample test is. Is this the best screen? Yeah, I think so. But before we get to all of that, we have to select, well, let's just, I already did that. I chose, I restricted my sample from 2000 all the way to 2017. So 2017. And all I did for that is I took this list, this history, and then I went down to the year that I didn't want. Then I selected those players and deleted them because I don't want to use them because I want to use them to do an out-of-sample test. So all I've done is taken 2018 out of there so I can use it as a test case. You could use any year you want. And I took 2019 there because we don't have second-year data for those guys yet, so it wouldn't even be useful. They're the guys I'm trying to project or predict. All right, so just some basics. And I'll include this table in here. You're not going to be able to see it very well. But what this is an average column. I went to my NFL database. And if we're going to look at expected points, right, we need to know what to expect from running backs with expected points. And so I just copied this average table on so you can see every season since 2000. You can see for top 24 running backs, so they're right there. How many rushing attempts they got, how many targets they got on average in the top 24, the rushing attempt percentage and the target percentage. So, in 2000, the top 24 running backs averaged 12% target share, right? That's just standard stats. Everyone should have a pretty good idea of what these numbers look like over the years because they're just good numbers to know. But expected points isn't as well known. So, like, what's a good expected points number for a running back? I don't know. Let's look at the average table. Since 2000, running backs in the top 24 have averaged about 89 expected points in the receiving game and 137 points in the rushing game. So that's where all the points are coming from. The most of it's coming from the rushing game or their expected points. But a good chunk, like a quarter of the value of a running back is coming from the receiving expected points. Now, I put passing expected points in here. That's really because I sometimes use this table to look at quarterbacks too. I've got it set up where I can just change the position and it looks at passing stats as well. But it's not important for us, although kind of interesting. And again, I did this sum because we're interested in running backs, so we want rushing and receiving games. So running back in the top 24 averages since 2000 217 expected points. So that gives us a baseline understanding of what's good, right? And also what their efficiency looks like. One thing I want to point out here is this drop off right here. We know the running back position has changed. We just know that as fans of the game, right? And what you see since 2007 is this drastic decrease in rushing attempts, right? And you can also see it a little bit, but not as clearly in expected points. And over the last 3 years, you see in the receiving game, the expected points of running backs has increased kind of markedly, like 10, 15 expected points more than usual. That just fits our understanding of what's happened with running backs for a little while. But it does affect the type of running backs we want to test, right? Do we really want to use running backs from 2000 to 2007 to try and predict running backs in 2019 when they have these different roles in the NFL? And so I don't. But that's something I want to know. When I shrink my sample, I want to take out those first 7 years. That would give me a 10-year history, actually, 2007 to 2017, and I'll get rid of those running backs from an era where rushing was more important than receiving, and I'll concentrate on the era where receiving is more valuable, which is true today, and it's going to be true in 2020. So that's the sample I want to look at. All right, just to give you an idea of what these stats do, because that you should get an understanding of which stat is predictive, which isn't, which predicts what. To put it in a model, you kind of have to understand what it can do, so you can decide if it belongs in that model. So one quick way I do that, and you don't have to do all this work or create these little lines. I'm doing it mostly for you guys. Like I would test it myself, and you don't have to test it in this exact way. But all I'm doing here is running quick R-squared formulas, and the formula for that is RSQ equals RSQ. And then you put, in the first section, you put all the stats that you want to test as variable 1, and variable 2, in this case, on this first line, is PPR points in that same year. So that's just a quick way of doing an R-squared formula. It all has to be numbers. It can't have like an NA or a dash in there. It has to be a perfect data set, they call it, where it all has to be numerical data. But anyway, so this first row here is telling you how much. Hang on, what is it telling you? Each stat I've got in this little sample here predicts PPR points in that same year. So their draft capital predicted their PPR points about 26% of the variance. The number of games they played was 60% of the variance, and that's something we're going to have to think about. Do we really want to use players who don't play a full season to create a model with? No is the answer, right? And because it's so important, we want to make sure we have players with a similar stat in order to use them to create a model. You can see Russian expected points is incredibly predictive from 2000 to 2017 of PPR points in that year, and you can see that receiving expected points is incredibly predictive but not as predictive. But that's using those first 7 years that we know is not quite the same as the modern NFL era. Now these two columns with the big red bars here, and these are the efficiency stats. Efficiency stats, as you know, because every nerd says it, aren't predictive and aren't sticky, and that's why they have such lower numbers compared to these volume stats. But it is interesting that the sum EP here gets up to 95%. That tells you that rotoviz's model is incredibly good at valuing touches, right? They're valuing the right thing. But the player's efficiency with it doesn't tell you a lot about the points they're going to score. Again, running back efficiency is we haven't found a good way of measuring it. But like with wide receivers, Blair Andrews showed with rotoviz that being efficient in your first year is a good indicator of being in a group of players who are likely to get more opportunity the following year. So while it's not sticky, I do kind of want to adjust by it in a model. I want to adjust by draft capital because we know that matters. And we want to make sure players have the same number of games or are playing full seasons or mostly full seasons. I think I normally draw the line at like you have to play 8 games to be used to create the model. And I want to adjust by efficiency because it's not predictive in and of itself, but it's what we're using instead of just looking at expected points. We're assuming, based on Blair Andrews' testing, and I've done the testing as well before, it's posted on Patreon somewhere, that being efficient is going to make the staff want to give you more opportunity. So while it's not predictive in and of itself, it'll be an interesting little adjustment. Okay, and also we know from just this first row here that we want to try and predict some expected points. We don't want to project rushing expected points or receiving expected points. We want to project the sum, the total expected points that they're going to get in year 2, because that's where fantasy points come from. If we know 95%, if we know the sum EP, sum of expected points, we can predict 95% of their PPR points. That's the amount of variance we can account for. So if we can predict EP, we're onto a winner, and it's a lot easier than predicting fantasy points, or at least that's the idea here. All right. The next column here, this is how well each of these things projects the next year's stats, and you see the numbers drop off remarkably, right? The best we've got is rushing expected points, receiving expected points is like 1% higher than rushing expected points. Everything takes a slight dip beyond that. The next test I've run here is how well each stat predicts the same stat the next year. So games predicts games in year 2 about 31% of the time. That gives us a nice baseline, that 31%. How well does knowing that a player played 5 games tell you he's going to play 5 games the next year, you know? And that gives you a nice baseline understanding, where you see rushing and expected points is better than that. So it is predictive, it does have signal. And again, and yet another drop off for efficiency, but it does have some signal, especially rushing expected points here, right? And again, the sum of expected points is predicting the next year better than everything else, so we definitely want to target that. This last column, what have I got tested here? This is projecting. Oh, this is how well it's projecting some expected points in the following year. And you can see that games is kind of still just around that 31% mark. But the expected points, and also interestingly, the efficiency raises, which is the signal Blair Andrews is talking about. Being efficient is increasing players' opportunity or chances of getting more opportunity the following year. So it increases it trying to predict next year versus predicting itself, which is interesting. Anyway, so I'm going to refine my sample a little bit, and what I did is I took out those first 7 years. So now our sample is running backs from 2007 to 2017. So we've got a 10-year sample history. That's pretty good. The next thing we know is we want to eliminate some of these players, right? I don't want to use players that only played 1 game in order to start projecting running backs in 2020, right? So I'm going to draw that line at 8. So I'm going to go find 8. Where are you? All right, there it is. So I'm only going to use players that played 8 or more games in their first season, just like that. And you can see the numbers change up there if you're interested in it. But I also don't want to use players that didn't play the next season, right? Players who were injured or traded or were so bad they never got put on the team again. Like, I don't want those to be used to project my running backs either. So I'm going to go find running backs that only played 8 or more games in their first and second season, right? And so I'm going to get rid of that. Now, what you could do depends. I mean, you could run this all over again. I'll include all of this, and you go at it however you want. What you could do is organize by draft capital. Like, I don't want to use undrafted free agents to project running backs. Honestly, that just sounds fair. Like, most of those guys don't get opportunity in their first year. They're not good indicators of what Josh Jacobs is going to do. So if you wanted to, you could go take out the Damian Williams, Benny Cunninghams of the world and just say, like, I don't want to use them. And there's a lot. Because there are a lot of undrafted free agents in the last 10 years that got opportunity in the NFL. So, where's the start of it here? 329. Could go ahead and take those players out, right? I think that would be fair as well. We could also just look at running backs with a certain threshold. Like, I'm only really interested in using running backs who got 100 expected points or more. And if you need to know what that relates to in touches, that's what the average column could be used for, right? So, rushing expected points, if you're getting around 80 expected points in the receiving game, 130 to 140 points in the receiving game, you're probably getting around 200 to 240 rushing attempts in the NFL. So it gives you an idea of what you're looking at. I'm not going to go that complicated with it right now because I'm trying to get out of here before we hit the hour mark, right? So, but you could continue to wean down the sample to the best possible group of players that you could use to try and predict running backs. And that's what you should do. I'm just going to go ahead and get on with it. So in order to create we're just going to do a simple regression model. If you don't know how to add this, I've got a video on this already in the public. If you go to my YouTube, or I can send the link to you if you DM me, or just look through my YouTube videos. It's simple or a starter to basic regression modeling. So I talk through how to get this little data analysis pack in Excel, if you've got Excel. It's really simple. It's included if you have Excel. You just have to click a few buttons and it downloads it for you. Anyway, if you click on the data analysis under the data tab, go to regression, because we're doing a simple multilinear regression model. Multilinear just means we're going to use more than one variable to try and predict one other variable, right? So the Y input in this first box is what we're going to try and predict. And I'm going to try and predict the total expected points in year 2. So what year 1 can tell us about their opportunity in year 2, essentially. To start off with, you can choose up to, I think, 17 variables it is, but not all variables are good. That's also partly why I do a little testing beforehand. I'm going to use our expected points and our efficiency, points over expected here. And why not, we'll look at some EP, and we'll select all of those columns because we already know they're perfect. They all have numerical data. If you notice, like, I selected from the column heading, and if you do that, you have to click this labels button here, because otherwise it's going to think you have non-numerical data in there. The reason I'm doing that is because to read the sheet that's about to be produced by running a regression model, it's a lot easier if you know what everything is, and if you include labels, then it literally tags it for you, it lists it. So that's why I do it that way. Yeah, we're not going to talk about confidence level or anything right now. So you click OK, and it puts out this little summary workflow. You see how quick that was? We're using a very simple model here. But it can get more complicated. Again, watch that video where I talk through a few more of these numbers. Like, this is your multiple R squared. The R squared it's producing by using all of them. This is the R squared individually. This is the adjustment. The R squared that this model can make from its baseline. Anyway, this is the standard deviation or standard error. This is the number of observations it had to work with. So we've got 110 in our sample players. There's a lot of stuff in here. The number that you have to start worrying about almost straight away is this one, however, p-value. This tells you how probable, it's a probability value, how probable it is to have a relationship, or how significant that relationship is to predicting the stat you want. Now, I don't know how much sense that made. Again, I talked through it a little bit more in that other video, but a simple way to test it is this. It's something I do I'm very visual, I guess. All right, you just do 1 minus the p-value, drag it down. Now, if you've ever heard people talk about 95% certainty probabilities, that's what this is. It has to be 95% or above. Not this value, but 1 minus that value. This is telling you the over, the certainty threshold. So as you can see, the receiving fantasy points over expected is falling well below that 95% significance value, so you normally wouldn't use it. I wouldn't worry about these num things. We don't have time to get into it. But you can see that the intercept it's created, what it's basically telling you is if it made a graph. I'm looking at this camera, so an X and Y graph. The intercept is the point at which it starts on the Y-axis, right? So the intercept is that number. So that means it's going to start everyone you project right there, and then it's going to use the numbers to adjust it up or down based on their efficiency and their opportunity to predict what opportunity they're going to get in year 2, where they're going to fit in that simple graph. I think that makes sense. And what these numbers here are telling you is how relevant that stat was to creating that pattern. Or whether it's just noise. Now, it's also really important to learn some of these others, but, simple modeling. Honestly, 95% in NFL models, I'm not sure most people know what a p-value is. So just concentrate on the R squared if you just really want a high R squared number, and that's all you care about, right? So let's take a look here. I think we're going to take out just some of this cross variance here, because some EP, remember, is the summation of rushing and receiving expected points. So here we're double and triple counting, because these are also this. So what we're going to do is go back And instead of running a regression model with all of those, we're going to just use the sum and the efficiency. Efficiency is here, sum is there, right? And then run it again, and it gives you another results. Now I'm just going to skip ahead here, because what we also want to do, what I want to do in mine at least, is I want to use draft capital, because I think it matters, unfortunately. It's not going to let me do that. I've got too much going on here with this. Sorry, this is just basic Excel messery. If you've got a merge cell like that, it won't let you import things out. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and run my regression model with draft capital involved now. So I'll change my variables to draft, rushing fantasy points over expected, receiving fantasy points over expected, and some points over and some expected points. Now what you could also do is create a sum fantasy points over expected, right? But I want to keep them separate because, well, if you take a look at the numbers, like if you're really efficient in the rushing game and inefficient in the receiving game, I think that's different than just being efficient overall, you know. So I kind of like that we can divide it that way. If we run a simple test here, we see when we take out that double and cross and quadruple variable, that pretty much all of these stats get to 95% certainty, and receiving efficiency actually slightly lower than you'd want, but I'm fine with it, honestly. They're rushing stats, and this is a quick model. And you can see that it's adjusted R square is telling us that it's going to predict around 41% of the variance going into year 2. Using draft capital and everything else, but we'll find out. Alright, so to create this model, what's the formula, right? The formula is the intercept plus all of this stuff. So it's the intercept plus this variable, draft, times this coefficient, which is minus 0.23181. The number's actually bigger, but we're just going to, if you click on the cell, you'd see a bigger number, but we're just going to leave it there. It's then plus rushing fantasy points over expected times 0.64. So rushing fantasy points over expected times 0.64. 835, sure. We'll include all the little numbers, why not? And then receiving fantasy points over expected times 1.194314. That number's coming from right here, if you can see it. Rushing fantasy points over expected times its coefficient, which is actually 1.191434. And then we're going to do the same with that last variable there, which is sum EP times 0.388, sure, 38877, right? So there it is. I wrote it that way. Don't put the equal sign in front of it, otherwise it tries to run it. I'm writing it this way so that I know I'm keeping track of where everything is. This is just for me. The word draft there, it's not going to go find it for you. It's just like me handwriting it down so I know what everything is. So that then when I come back over here, create a model column, if you like, and I copy and paste it in, then instead of it saying draft, I can go and click on their draft capital. Instead of it saying run fantasy points over expected, I'll click on that cell. Same with receiving points. Same with the expected points. And it creates a projection. I'm going to format this just so it's simpler to see. Alright. Why not? We'll put in a little fancy formatting here. This is all just me doing Excel work, so I can keep talking to you about it. It's not part of making a model. Alright. Let's shrink. Actually, let's go to here. Right there. Alright, so on the left you've got all the players in their rookie seasons and all their rookie stats, and this is what they did in year 2. This is what our model projects they're going to do in year 2. So if we sort highest to lowest, we find that it predicted that Alvin Kamara would have 284 expected points in his second year. He actually had 301, so it did a fairly good job. A simple thing I like to do when I'm seeing the results is to do the projection, or what they actually got minus a projection. Sometimes I'll post this column as well. Don't know how well people understand it, but it's useful for me. Alright. Put a little formatting in there for funsies. And also, honestly, visualization is really useful for me. So you see it was actually 16 points lower than what he actually got. You see right here, it really got Ezekiel Elliott wrong. It thought it would only get 277 points. In fact, he got 190 points. So actually, it thought he was going to get more points than he did. I can't remember if he missed games or whatever. But either way, 270 points would be a really high projection for a running back. Based on our average table, we know that would be well within the top 24 running backs. So it would have told us that Ezekiel Elliott was going to be a top 24 running back. Those really aren't the guys that we struggle with, but it's good to know it's getting the really productive guys right. Correct? So I would work on this. I'd refine my sample. I would try and get a better model. One way that you can test it is do the RSQ formula again against the model to what they actually got, and that's how you're going to find out what your R squared is in sample, not out of sample. So yeah, we're getting 43% of the variance explained, which as you can see is better than any of our stats by themselves. So we're more accurately projecting running back opportunity the following year. All right. What I would do is keep working on that. I would go back to the drawing board. I would take some players out. I'd put some players in. I would refine the sample so it's giving me a better projection, a fairer projection, right? But we don't have time for all that nonsense. This is the same process over and over again. So what I'm going to do is see, for right now, what does it say about the 2019 running backs? That feels like a better conclusion than most things I could come up with. So I'm going to run this model that we just created, this formula, model formula that we just created on the broader sample, highest to lowest, and then we're going to sort just to hide 2019 running backs, because we don't know what they're going to do the next year, so the columns will be 0. And there we see the projection for running backs in their second season. It thinks right now our model in its current form with a 43% predictive power in sample. We haven't tested an out of sample yet. Thinks that Miles Sanders is going to get the most opportunity. Some opportunity rushing and receiving. Josh Jacobs is second, David Montgomery is third, followed by David Singletary and Tony Pollard. I guess Zeke's going to get injured again. But again, also based on that average column, you see 133 is well below the expected of a top 24 running back. So it's not saying Pollard's going to be a top 24 running back in that same situation. It's saying he did really well, but we also know Elliott got injured, he got extra playing time, so on and so forth. So that actually makes sense why he's rising to the top, right? Anyway, so it tells you something of the opportunity you can project, and it's overly positive on Miles Sanders, but it's positive on Miles Sanders predicting a top 24 season. Also Josh Jacobs, it's not predicting more than a top 24 season for either of them. David Montgomery, it actually kind of hates a little bit, even with that good draft capital there. It does not like the opportunity and the efficiency he was able to produce in his first season. It thinks he's going to produce or get less expected points than a top 24 running back in year 2. Do I believe that? No. You were there. Have we refined the sample enough? I don't think we did. I think we could sort by draft capital a little better. We could go above 8 games, so we're not looking at just players that played 8 games in both seasons. That's the fun of a model. Get the best sample, the fairest sample you can, then create the model out of it, and then test out of sample. We haven't done that yet. Tell you what, why don't I do this? What year did we take out? It was 2018, wasn't it? Okay. We can run that real quick, so I'm going to do it. Let's see what our out of sample testing tells us. All I'm doing here is going and getting the data from 2018, because remember I took that out my sample to start with, so 2018 was not used to create this model, so it's an out of sample test. And what we can do, unhide, hide please, seriously, is run a simple R² formula, RSQ. So these are the expected points they actually got. How well did they relate to our model? And our model scores 70%. It's really good for an out of sample test, right? We caught 70% of the variables, and I don't even think we did a particular variance. I don't think we've even done a particularly deep job right now of predicting running backs. Now note that the 2018 class was a really easy class to project. I mean, you didn't need a model to tell you that Saquon Barkley was going to get all the expected points next year, or that Nick Chubb was going to get, 200 expected points. So lots of these players were actually pretty easy to project. Kerryon Johnson was a question mark last year. He looks like more like a top 24 with this projection, which is where I was at, which makes sense. I was a lot higher on Sony Michel. This model tells me not to be. But again, there was no one really difficult to project with running back opportunity last year. Although it does have Lindsey over Royce Freeman, just using their rookie stats. So that adds more fight. But it also has them, almost splitting the work, which is almost exactly what happened in 2019. But again, I don't think the 2018 class was particularly hard to project, so I'm not sure I believe the 70% too strongly, but I think it did a fairly good job. I think our out of sample test, I'll leave it in here for you. I'll leave the formula too, just in case. I'm leaving the formulas in just in case me saying them isn't useful and you need to see them. Right there is overall positive. I'll leave this in here so you can see what that does. I'll even leave my notes so you can just copy and paste if you want. Note these three tabs are named roughly the same thing. The difference is that the dates on them, 2007 to 2017. You can see how I'm slowly refining my sample. You get to my test, and then you see the out of sample test. That's basically it. Those are the steps in creating a model. But again, it's about creating a better sample size, a fairer sample size. If you choose your sample unfairly, like you only choose, or you change numbers, don't change numbers, you only choose undrafted free agents, and it's going to look great for undrafted free agents and terrible first round picks, right? It's you have to choose your sample. I think that matters more than anything when you're starting to get into modeling and stuff. All right, gonna lane that RSQ results, and I'll upload this and tag you all in it when I post it on Patreon. I hope that was helpful. It's a 40-minute video. There's really no quicker way I can show you the basic steps of creating a model. It's a really simple model. We're just using a couple of stats. And with running back opportunity, where it's already pretty predictive, we kind of know if running backs get a lot of opportunity, they're going to get a lot more opportunity. Then there are no surprises and no hiccups. There's no, wow, I thought that stat would be relevant, and it's not. But hopefully, you just go experiment, and you have to think it through. I know it's really tempting to go, oh, it doesn't make sense to me. Please explain it to me much more slowly. It's some of this stuff you don't get through slow explanation. It's just trying it and thinking it through logically, and you're like, clicks. Hopefully I've covered the mechanics of going through. And if you all start posting 95% R² numbers, I'm going to call bullshit, because, again, NFL is not very predictive of itself. You're not about to uncover, like, the golden stat. There isn't one. Certainly not with this running back data that we have available to us in the modern NFL era. But it is useful to learn, and it can tell you some things. Like, I think it's really interesting, just in our quick test here, that we could have done just as easily last year, that it's predicting Royce Freeman and Lindsey to get an almost identical split, right? It didn't separate them out because of their draft capital significantly. And that's using a 10-year history of draft capital efficiency and opportunity, and it says not to worry about Lindsey's efficiency, but they may limit each other to a lower top 36, top 24 ceiling. So that's a result that I find interesting from this simple exercise. I will upload this incarnation of it, closing it out, post it in the Patreon thread so that you all can get access to it while watching this video. I think you all voted wrong. There's nothing more boring than watching a guy talking about models or talking about making a model, but if that's what you're here for, then that's what I will do, obviously. I'm going to get you a Chase Claypool one out soon too, because I really just need to talk about him and explain some of the things that have happened with his score in my pre-draft thingy-majiggy model. Alright, talk to you again next time. Hopefully this was helpful. Let me know if there's anything else I can do or something that wasn't quite right, and I'll try and explain it as best I can. And I will talk to you next time about Chase Claypool here on the Patreon only grind, or the grind in general. That one might be public. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. See you later. Thanks very much. Bye.
Do you have the time to listen to me grind?